श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करम् अस्मद्गुरुभ्यो नमः. Dear friends, we are in the first shloka of Dashashloki and we are trying to understand the Siddhantabindu of Madhusudana Saraswati. In the previous class, the author has explained how the apparently contradictory statements of the Advaita are to be reconciled with the apparent differences like Jiva, Ishvara, Brahma. So all these are to be answered, are to be properly understood. So basically, it is because of ignorance that various postulations have been made, and they are like individual soul, the supreme soul. So according to Advaita, all these are only our postulations. So naturally, the Upanishads of course mention some such distinctions. Sometimes we find that Jiveshwarau, both are mentioned, both individual soul and the supreme soul differently mentioned. But Madhusudana Saraswati explains that such distinctions should be understood only in the sense of an anuvada. That means they are actually reiterating something that has already been stated. So there are two levels, that is the empirical level and the absolute level. So it is the problem practically faced by all the Advaitins, that though the absolute reality is one without any second, at the empirical level, mundane level, of course we have to accept the distinction difference also. Otherwise, we cannot altogether deny the phenomenal world. So that is the problem here. And here we find everywhere difference. That is the nature of the world. And Shastra does not simply state whatever is there. For example, if there is a tree, no Shastra is required to say that it is a tree. It is a general knowledge. But Shastra tries to find some common cause of all this diverse world, diverse creation. So that is actually the purpose of the Shastra. So here also, when Advaita comes forth to explain the diversity of the world, the only thing it has is that though the difference appears, it is only a phenomenon that can be negated later on. So after all, throughout this diverse world, there is one reality, one unchanging reality, and it is the Brahman. So that is the reality, and all that appears is only a thing to be negated. That is Advaita standpoint. Now, people may say that when scriptures themselves are talking about that kind of distinction, so how can you negate it? Then the Advaita's reply to this is, of course, scriptures also talk about the diversity, the difference, distinction, etc. And beginning with this, they finally reach to that particular level where all this difference is negated and one final a consensus is accepted there, and it is in the purport of Advaita. So for this we have to study all the Upanishads at a stretch. That means with mutual connection. That means they are to be connected and then understood. Otherwise, separately, if we consider all the sentences of the scriptures, of course we find there some apparent difference also. So where, at what level they propound difference, at what level they negate that, at what level they are talking about absolute reality is very important to be understood. And for that purpose only, here, though the difference is initially stated by the scriptures, later on that difference has been completely denied, stated that it is only one reality at the ultimate level. So this is the basic thing of all the Upanishads, that whatever we experience is the phenomenal mundane world, and whatever is beyond this, is the reality. So two things are there. That is the essence of the Upanishads, which want to exhort us, saying that if we give more prominence to this particular mundane and phenomenal world, we will be caught in the lure of this world, and therefore in order to get out of this, we have to understand an absolute reality that is pervading through the universe, and that is the only reality. So that being the summum bonum of entire Advaita philosophy, there cannot be any difference possible in it. Thus the Upanishads, after all, state the difference, but their main purpose, objective, is to explain the ultimate reality. So phalavat sannidhau apalamapi tadangam bhavati. This is the Mimamsa Nyaya, which states that when something principle is being elaborated, all the other things become secondary to that. Similarly here also, when the Upanishads themselves state that by self-realization a person attains immortality, amrutatva, then the exposition of difference is only for the sake of that non-dual experience only. It is not for its own sake. Thus phalavat is the self-realization and aphalam is the Dvaita Jnana. So the Upanishads should be understood in this sense, that the Dvaita Jnana has no other purpose stated in the Upanishads, but Advaita Jnana is being stated as leading to the moksha. Therefore the Dvaita Jnana should also be understood in relation with the Advaita Jnana. That means it has to support that. That is the synthesis between Dvaita and Advaita that can be achieved with the help of the Upanishads. And after saying that, now Madhusudana Saraswati explains, Ghatadi Dvaita Jnanasyapi Advaita Sanmatra Amshe Ajnate Pramanya Abhyupagapacha Jnana Jnanayoho Samanashriya Vishayatva Niyamat. Now he says, Ghatadi Dvaita Jnanasyapi. What is this Ghatadi Dvaita Jnana? That means the worldly experience of pot, tree, book, everything of the dual world. That is Ghatadi Dvaita Jnana. So everybody is getting this kind of jnana only. So we all understand the universe as diverse, as different. So this is the Dvaita Jnana, of course. But Advaita Sanmatramshe Ajnate Pramanya Abhupagacha. What is this? This Advaita Sanmatramshe Ajnate Pramanya Abhyupagamacha. That means Advaita Sanmatramshe Ajnate, that the only reality of the form of existence being unknown, all the other things are authentic only. It's actually, in other words, we can say that the entire world is real till one gets realization. So once you achieve that realization, this Dvaita Jnana, that is removed. But till that realization, till the rise of that kind of self-realization, all the world experience cannot be altogether negated. That's why Dharmaraj Adhvarindra also says in the Vedanta Paribhasha that Brahmajnana Anantaram hi Jagataha Badhaha. So he says Brahma Sakshatkara Anantaram hi Jagato Badhaha. So the world is real for all of us who are below and under the influence of ignorance. So to us this is real and we have to pass through this. But when one attains the ultimate reality, that means when one is awakened in that particular self-realization of undual Brahman, undual reality, then the world appearance disappears. That is the paradigm there. That means till that particular moment it appears, but once it is it takes place, so the world experience has got no value at all. And for this reason only they have been terming this world experience as mithya, vitatha, and with other words also. So thus the world is not absolutely absent like any other sky flower, etc. It has of course some existence, but its existence is of no value. That's what Advaita philosophy wants to say. It doesn't deny the existence of the world. It wants to say that this world has an existence, of course, but it is not permanent, and therefore whatever is passing through, that energy should be realized, and it is the Advaita energy. And if one is awakened in this, then world experience becomes valueless. And till that, the world experience has, of course, some value. Thus, it is accepted in the Advaita philosophy, Jnana Jnanayoho Samanashraya Vishayatva Niyamat. And as a rule, Jnana and Ajnana, that means both knowledge and ignorance, both are supposed to have same substratum and same object. That means if I say I don't know something, then I am supposed to be the substratum of that, and when I know that particular object also, I should be the substratum, and that particular object should be known to me. Thus, the object and substratum of both knowledge and ignorance should be the same. That is the rule here. Jadecha pramana prayojana abhavena ajnana abhyupagamat. And what about the inert world? What about the insentient world? They say that this jada is pramana prayojana abhavena. So it doesn't have any purpose of the pramana. That means whatever perception, inference, verbal testimony, analogy, and other negation, etc., other valid proofs of experience are taken, but all these proofs have no purpose regarding the matter. So therefore, all the pramana are not for this jada or inert world. Ajnana anabhyupagamat. Therefore, we cannot say that the inert world has ajnana, because in the previous sentence it has been very clearly stated that whatever is inert must be totally ignorant. But knowledge and ignorance should have same substratum and same object also. So here when we are talking about the inert world, it cannot be stated as the substratum of ignorance also. Tad avachinna chaitanya. But when it comes to the consciousness which is conditioned by this matter, that means, for example, here in the body also there is consciousness, there is chaitanya, there is energy, but it is conditioned by the body. The only problem is when the person identifies himself with the body, then there will be so many problems. When he detaches himself and finds himself as the pure energy, there will not be any problem at all. So this is all this all depends on how that particular consciousness or energy is conditioned. And in other Upanishads also, like Taittiriya Upanishad, they have tried to explain this particular reality with the help of Panchakosha. That means we understand that our awareness or consciousness will be fluctuating between two different states. Thus we sometimes find ourselves in the Annamaya Kosha, that means at the physical level. So the person will be identifying himself with the outer physical body, and thus whatever happens on the physical body will be attributed to the consciousness also. Thus there are so many misconceptions, so much of ignorance, and because of that so much of grief also. So whatever grief or sorrow we experience, that all depends on the conditioning of that particular awareness or consciousness. So at the grosser level we find ourselves being conditioned by the body, therefore we confine ourselves to the physical body and understand that we are the body, and therefore all the qualities and properties of the body will be just ascribed to the consciousness, and there will be a result therefrom. Now that particular result in the form of grief can be at different levels also. At the next level, we often find ourselves being confined to the Manomaya Kosha, that means the emotional level. So we will be identifying ourselves with the emotions, anger, sadness, anxiety, depression. So all these are the emotions, and we will be totally confined to that, and we will be under the influence of the feelings only. And because of those emotions, we find ourselves depressed, grievous, sad, angry, etc. So this is all how we find ourselves at what level. And above that there is another level called pranamaya. That means if I find myself only as the vital breath passing through the nostrils, the air only which passes through the nostrils inside, that enters and becomes mind, speech and individual soul. All this is only the air. So if I find that I am only the vital breath, vital air, then that is the pranamaya kosha. So here also my pure consciousness is being confined or conditioned. And above that I have the vijnanamaya kosha, that is the knowledge, perception, understanding. So at this level also, if I think that I am the understanding, if I think that I am the perception, and the factor that is behind the function of all the sense organs etc. is the vijnana or the knowledge, and I am that. So this kind of identity between myself and the knowledge or perception is vijnanamaya kosha, and because of this whatever happens to me I will be identifying with that. So I find myself as knowledgeable, wise etc. But according to the Advaita philosophy, based on Upanishadic philosophy, it is also a conditioning of the mind, and there is another state beyond that, and that is Anandamaya Kosha. In Anandamaya Kosha, I find myself blissful, totally elated with ecstatic joy. I will be totally flying high, and this kind of high bliss or joy is Ananda. And this Ananda is of two types, of course. One is material, that means I derive some Ananda out of the things around. I get joyful because of the things around, the world around, the contacts, the individuals, the situations and the conditions, everything. So this is one kind of Ananda. And another kind of Ananda, giving up all these things, if I don't depend upon anything for my Ananda, this is the Paramananda, that is actually the self joy. It is created by me, within me, not depending on any other external factor. So this is another type of Ananda. But in both these kinds of Ananda, I will be conditioned by the Ananda itself, and thus Ananda will also pull me down into the body, pull me down into some existence. So the Upanishadic philosophy says that this is also a facet of Brahman, but beyond that, without all these kosha, there is one reality, that is the absolute reality. That means the physical body, the emotions, the vital air, the knowledge, perception etc., cognitions and the bliss, all these are only the envelopes. Because of these envelopes only, the consciousness remains totally entangled in this material world. So thus these are sheets, that's what the Upanishadic language says. These are all sheets or the kosha or the envelopes, and being in the envelope, the consciousness cannot go above and remain in its pure form. So this is the kosha concept. And here this text says Ajnana avacchinnatvat. Naturally this Chaitanya is Ajnana avachinna. That means it is conditioned by that Ajnana. Ajnanadeva tatrapi ajnana vyavahara upapattehe. So as a matter of fact, the inert world cannot be stated as ignorant, but of course, since the consciousness is being conditioned by the ajnana or ignorance, the inert world also can be stated as ajnana avachinna. So this is also possible. Sarva pramananam sarva pramananam cha ajnata jnapakatvenaiva pramanyat. Now this is regarding the basic function of all the pramana. Pramana means the factors which give us the prama or right knowledge. And all the pramana, how do they function? What for do they function? All the pramana function for a single purpose, ajnata jnapakatvenaiva. That means they want to give us the knowledge of that thing which is otherwise unknown hitherto. So that kind of object is to be presented by the pramana to the pramata. So here the Shastra explains that all the pramana have their pramanya because of this particular feature. That means only when they present something that is unknown before, then only they become authentic. Thus the authenticity or the validity of the means depends on the function they perform. Anyadha smruterapi tadapattiriti. Otherwise, smriti or memory would also become pramana. Because in our tradition of Indian philosophy, we don't accept smriti or memory as a kind of pramana. Pramana, pratyaksha, anumana, upamana, shabda, arthapatti, anupalabdhi in Vedanta system, all the six are considered as pramana, but smriti is separated. And that's why in the Nyaya Shastra also, when they say jnanam dvividham smritir anubhavascha, and they say anubhavaha yadharthaha ayadharthaha, and smriti is separated. They say smriti by itself cannot be a pramana, and smriti depends on anubhava. Therefore, if that particular anubhava of an object is real, then its smriti will also be real. Or we can say, this is according to some other thinkers, that smriti is always real only, because when you experienced a rope as snake, there also you remember later on that you saw a snake there on a rope, and this memory or the remembrance is not unreal, it is real. Only that particular experience was unreal. Therefore, smriti can be real. That is what some thinkers hold. Evam Vedanteshu. In this way, after all, you analyze all the things like individual soul, supreme soul, the higher souls like Hiranyagarbha, etc. You analyze and you study the Upanishadic sentences in an order, and then try to understand the anomalies there, and you can reply to all these anomalies. This is only how you are disposed to this particular Upanishadic ideology. Evam Vedanteshu Sarvatra. That means in the entire Upanishadic philosophy, Evam Vidha Virodhe, whenever you encounter, whenever you come across this kind of anomaly or apparent contradiction, you have to understand one thing, Ayameva Pariharaha. So this alone is the kind of solution there. That means we have shown you a path, and now you have to devise your own method of answering all the systems there. After all, it is left to you how you understand the Upanishadic sentence and you answer to all the other ideology. See, when we follow a particular doctrine, when we are convinced of the efficacy of a particular method, when we are fully convinced internally of reality, so naturally we tend to adhere to that particular theory only. And thus in the world we find Dvaiti, Advaiti, Yogi, Sankhya. So all these are different kinds of people, but after all, where is the difference? The difference is in their understanding of that particular theory. Thus, when we are convinced of the purposefulness of this Advaita ideology, we will be clinging to that. We can never deviate from that, and we can never question the value of that particular ideology, because we have all the questions answered. And now when somebody questions the benefit of Advaita or the nature of Advaita, so the person who is well convinced can be in a position to answer to all the questions. So here Madhusudana Saraswati says, now we have shown here the Avachedavada, Pratibimba-vada, Drushti-Srushti-vada, Srushti-Drushti-vada, Ekeshvara-vada, Ekajiva-vada. So all these are our methods of answering the Advaita. That means we will be analyzing the dual world and below the Nirguna Brahma, and here we can have all kinds of reconciliations, we can have all kinds of agreements, but we do not compromise with the ultimate reality. The ultimate reality will always be the absolute Brahman, that is devoid of all the properties, secondless, and which is the lone reality of okay. But when it comes to the other things below that, we are always ready to make all flexibilities, and we will be stretching ourselves to accommodate other ideology also. And this kind of reconciliation is possible in Advaita. This kind of an arrangement, this kind of an adjustment is made in the Advaita. That's why we have stated all these theories, Vrishti Srishtivada, Pratibhimbavada. So it should not be understood that in the Advaita also there are so many contradictions. These are not at all contradictions. These are only the various ways to show that it is absolute reality only. That's what Madhusudana Saraswati wants to say. Tadahuhu Vartikakara Padaha. Now he quotes a sentence from Sureshwaracharya. He says, Yaya Yaya Bhavet Pumsam Vyutpattif Pratyagatmani Sasaiva Prakriya Jneya Sadhvi Sacha Anavasthita. So he says, Yaya Yaya Bhavet Pumsam Vyutpattihi Pratyagatmani. So Pratyagatman, that means the inner self as Brahman. So that is the lone reality. And Yaya Yaya Bhavet Vyutpattihi, by whatsoever method that kind of realization can be made, Sasaiva Prakriya Sadhvi. All that method, all that recourse, all that provision is proper only. That means whatever method you adopt, there is no problem as long as it leads to that particular absolute reality. And therefore Sasaiva Prakriya Sadhvi, and that is absolutely perfect, no problem, and Sacha Anavasthita, and there will not be any defect of regressus ad infinitum or any other problem. There is no problem of that being unestablished also. Thus it all depends on what kind of method we have taken, whether it takes to the absolute reality or not. In the Advaita philosophy, the methods can be many, varied, but still if all the methods are leading to that particular absolute reality, then there will not be any problem. We will definitely accommodate that kind of method. This is Sureshwaracharya's shloka. Sureshwaracharya was a direct disciple of Shankara Bhagavatpada, and he had the great fortune of serving the lotus like feet of Adi Shankaracharya, and therefore we can say that he was the person who got directly the sacred knowledge from the historical philosophical figure like Shankara Bhagavatpada. So that's why this is the first hand Advaita knowledge which Sureshwara Acharya got from Shankaracharya, and therefore we can safely rely on this shloka. Shruti Tatparya Vishayibhuta Arthaviruddhancha Heyameva iti Shatashah Udghoshitam Asmabhihi. Then Madhusudana Saraswati says, Asmabhihi Shatashah Udghoshitam. That means 100 times we have stated very vocally, very strongly that whatever goes against the purport of the Upanishadic philosophy, that means Shruti Tatparya Vishayibhuta Artha Viruddham. Shruti Tatparya Vishaya Artha. That means whatever is the final purport of the scriptures, that is the Shruti Tatparya Vishayibhuta Artha. So that is the meaning, that is the sense. And if something is going against this particular purport, that is Heyameva, that one should give up. That means that should be abandoned completely if it is going against the Vedanta and Veda. Iti, so thus we have stated several times. Tasmat nakinchidetat. Therefore, if somebody says that some of the Upanishadic sentences are dealing with the exposition of the dual world and only few sentences are there, they are talking about the non-dual world. Now Madhusudana Saraswati says it all has to be perfectly justified, and we have seen that several methods are possible if they are leading to one undual reality, and therefore your objections, your questions and your refutations are of no use at all. Tasmat nakinchidetat. That means it is valueless. Tadevam jivasya upadhina abhibhutatvat samsara upalabdhihi. Now this is the Advaita understanding, that jivasya samsara upalabdhihi. Now this has to be understood. What is this samsara? Samsara is taking birth several times and experiencing or enjoying the world several times. This is actually samsara. That means one conditioned self taking several bodies several times is actually samsara. And how does the consciousness take this kind of samsara? Now Madhusudana Saraswati says, Upadhina abhibhutatvat. The only thing is, as long as this self or consciousness, that energy is in the body, as long as it depends on the senses and intellect, mind, etc. to enjoy the world outside, so long it will have to take births. So the number of births depend upon the intensity of that particular impression of matter on the consciousness. And that's why all these philosophical systems like yoga, Advaita, Sankhya, Uttarmimamsa, so whatever system you take, all these systems are emphasizing on the importance of withdrawing our senses from the external world. So it is Pratyahara, says the Yoga Shastra. It is Uparama, says the Advaita philosophy. But after all, one thing is very certain, that if we withdraw our senses, if we return the function of the senses inward and not bothering or caring about the external world, if we divert the senses inside, then we will be able to understand that particular reality. And that's why it all is stated in short here, that jivasya upadhi janya samsara upalabdhi. So the several births to this particular energy is because of that particular upadhi. And we had seen earlier also in the beginning of the text that the upadhi of the jiva is nothing, no other than but ignorance. And as long as there is ignorance of the reality, the soul will be conditioned, and so long he will have to take several births. It can be understood with the example of the rope and snake also. Here we have seen that because the rope, the reality is not known, something else is projected on that out of our own impression. So because of the previous impression, I have projected the snake on the rope, and at that particular moment the rope is not realized. But once, because of some external factor or internal factor, I know that it is only a rope, there is tattva jnana, there is realization. That is the realization of that particular rope there, and therefore ignorance of the rope being removed, rope that shines forth itself, and sarpa is only mithya because it cannot be altogether real or unreal. It is simply dismissed, it is simply negated. So that is the nature of that particular thing. For some time, for time being, it appeared, of course, the snake appeared, but the snake at that moment of illusion is neither real nor unreal. It is only something that is negated, and therefore Advaita philosophy calls that particular cognition as mithya. And ignorance of rope has caused the cognition of snake, and once the ignorance is removed, the snake, the rope is understood as rope itself. Similarly, there is spiritual ignorance, and because of that the world is appearing on the consciousness, and when that particular energy in the form of consciousness is realized, then the world experience will simply be dismissed, and there will be only the reality, energy or consciousness. So this is the secret of this particular analysis here, that ajnane nirakrite. So the ajnana being removed, then all its evolutes and effects will be automatically removed. That is the idea here. And Parameshwarasya tu. Now what about Parameshwara? Okay, we are talking about the individual soul, that because of ignorance only the individual soul is taking several births, etc. But what about the Supreme Soul? Parameshwarasya tu upadhivashitvat sarvajnatvadikamiti samyak upapadyate vyavastha. Now Madhusudana Saraswati says we can understand here that even in the Parameshwara, the upadhi is there, but the upadhi is within the control of Parameshwara only. The only difference between individual soul and the Supreme Soul is that here the consciousness is being conditioned, so it has got a name as Jiva. But when the ignorance is conditioned and controlled by the consciousness becomes Ishvara or Parameshwara, and all these appellations will be possible then. So the consciousness in that particular state can be called as omnipotent, omniscient and omnipresent, etc. So all these are possible only when the consciousness guides the ignorance or controls the ignorance, not being controlled by it. And thus the entire vyavastha, which has been questioned earlier, can be easily established with the help of this kind of logic in Advaita. So everything is appropriate in Advaita. There is no problem to any vyavastha at all. Nanu. Now another question still. Nanu bhavatu avidyavashat jiveshwara vibhaga vyavastha. Now, okay, we accept this kind of distinction between Jiva and Ishvara according to only avidya, that is ignorance only. Okay, so far you have explained that it is because of avidya or ignorance that there is the distinction called individual self and Supreme Self. Okay, for time being, if we accept this theory also, Manameyadi Pratikarma Vyavasthatu Katham Iti Chet. Now the question is, okay, the difference between individual soul and Supreme Soul can be resolved in this particular way that you have discussed so far. But what about another system in the world, Mana Meya, that is the Pratikarma Vyavastha. That means something is known to a particular person, something is unknown to another person. If there is one object, one person knows that, and the person besides him also cannot know that. So there is difference, of course. If you say there is only one soul, how can you justify the difference in knowledge? Because if there is one soul, there should be one knowledge. Everybody should get one kind of knowledge of the same world. But the object being the same also, sometimes there is difference in the response, in the knowledge of the particular object. That's why the world appears differently to different people. So how will you justify according to your Advaita philosophy? This is the objection here. Iti chet uchyate. Now Madhusudana Saraswati explains, he says, yeah, we will reply to this. Now, drishyatvat jadatvat vinashitvatcha parichinnapi avidya anirvachaniyatvena vichara asaha avarana vikshepa shaktidvayavati sarvagatam chidatmanam avrunoti anguliriva nayanasannihita suryamandalam. He says, this avidya, ignorance, is of this type. You first understand this. What is this avidya? In Advaita philosophy, this avidya or ignorance is one, drushya, that means it is perceivable. The world around is the drushya and it is actually the avidya. Jadatvat, and avidya is jada, that means it is inert, it is not consciousness, chidbhinna, and the entire world is jada. Vinashitvat, avidya is that which is destroyed and the entire world is destroyable. Therefore, it is jada, vinashi, and therefore avidya. Parichinna, and avidya has another feature that it is parichinna, limited. So even avidya is of this kind of nature. Still, anirvachaniyatvena vichara asaha, and we cannot really know what is this avidya, because the true nature of avidya or ajnana or ignorance cannot be thoroughly understood. Why? Because in Advaita philosophy this avidya is known as inexplicable. So being inexplicable, we cannot know it for certain as real or unreal also. Avarana vikshepa shakti dvayavati, and this we had seen in the beginning of the text also, that the avidya or ignorance has two forces. One is avarana, other is vikshepa. That means it has the power of concealing something and projecting some other thing. So with the help of the same example we had already understood, now I just repeat that when the rope is not known and the snake is projected on that, we understand that it is avidya which envelops the rope there, which covers the rope, and then projects something else. So covering something and projecting some other thing, these are the two forces of avidya. So avarana and vikshepa shakti dvayavati sarvagatam chidatmanam avrunoti. So this kind of avidya or ignorance envelops or covers or veils the chidatma, that is the consciousness which is sarvagata, omnipresent. So though the consciousness is all pervading, the avidya, which is inexplicable, which is inert, which is very limited, and which is only the perceivable one, so that veils or covers the consciousness. Now a question arises here that avidya is very limited and Atman or Brahma is unlimited. So how can the limited veil the unlimited one? That is the problem here. Now Madhusudana Saraswati gives the example here, Angulivat. So it is Anguliriva Nayana Sannihita Surya Mandalam. So naturally, if we close our eye with the finger, then that particular, the vast Surya Mandala will also be invisible. That means we cannot see that. So it all depends that that particular limited one is also able to cover our vision. So when it comes in between our vision and the object, we will not be able to see the reality. Just like the piece of cloud, when it comes between our vision and the sun, so for some time the sun appears to be behind the clouds or totally absent there in the sky. So we say that day, we say that the sky is without sun, but it is not possible. Only the clouds have come in between. Similarly here also, though avidya is like the piece of cloud, very limited, still it can envelop or cover the vast, unending, the all-pervading Brahma or the reality. Tatra chakshusha eva avarane angulerapi abhana prasangat adhisthana avarana mantarena vikshepa anupapattescha. Then in the example also, when my finger comes between my eye and the sun, when it covers that, I will not be able to see the sun. Chakshusha eva avarane, that means when the eye is only covered, angulerapi abhana prasangat. So actually that eye should not see even the finger. Here when avidya is coming in between, when because of avidya we are not able to see the reality, then we should be able to see at least the avidya, because we can see the finger there. Similarly we should see the avidya. He says adhisthana avaranam antarena vikshepa anupapattescha. Madhusudana Saraswati says that without covering the adhisthana, without enveloping that particular base or substratum, that avidya cannot project something else. That means as long as the rope is known, the snake cannot be projected there. So first the ignorance should cover this particular rope, then only a snake can be projected on that. Similarly in the world, something else should be projected so that the reality becomes totally obscure. Tat sa purva samskara jiva karma prayukta sati nikhila jagadadha akarena parinamate. Now the Advaita theory is being explained here, that sa purva samskara jiva karma prayukta. Now we understand that each jiva, because of his ignorance, does so many things, that is the karma, and because of this particular karma several results he will gain, and because of the result of that karma he will again get some impressions, and because of the impressions he will again do the same thing. So this kind of a cycle, a vicious circle between the impressions and karma is being observed in our day-to-day world, that I get some experience, and because of that I get some impression deep inside, and because of that particular deep impression called tendency, I will naturally do the same thing, repeat the same thing. Thus my karma depends on the result I get from that, and the impression again depends on the result. So this is the circle there. And here jiva purva samskara karma prayukta. So this avidya is being activated by the impression of the various deeds that the individual soul performs. Then being impelled by the impressions, sati nikhila jagadakarena parinamate, that ignorance itself manifests in the form of the entire world. It is only a modification of ignorance. Thus, we understand two things here. The world is a parinama with reference to the ignorance or ajnana. The world is only a vivarta with reference to the Brahman. These two things must be understood very carefully, because vivartavada and parinamavada appear to be contradictory, of course, but the Sankhya theory of parinamavada is denied, refuted by the Advaitins with the sutra Ikshaterna Shabdam Gaunaschernatma Shabdat Tanishthasya Mokshopadeshat, etc. in the beginning of the Brahma Sutra. And there also Rachananupvatteshchananumanam in the second chapter of Brahma Sutra also, the Sankhya theory of evolution is being vehemently criticized and refuted, of course, but they also can consider Parinamavada in this way, that the world is a parinama, a modification of ignorance or matter. The world is a vivarta, an apparent, you should say it is only apparent creation with reference to the Brahman. So Brahma cannot modify, therefore the world is only an appearance. But if you consider avidya, then the avidya has modified itself in the form of Brahman is possible. That's why in his commentary on Bhagavad Gita also Shankaracharya says that Prakriti can be understood as the Maya, avidya or Prakriti. So all the three mean same, and that's why in Sankhya philosophy whatever is stated as Trigunatmika Prakriti, that can be taken as avidya or Maya in the Vedanta philosophy. Thus the entire universe is a modification of ignorance and only an appearance of the Brahman. Sacha swagata chidabhasa dvara chit tadatmya apanna iti tat karyamapi sarvam abhasa dvara chit anusyutameva. Now he says Sacha, that ignorance, swagata chidabhasa dvara. Of course there is only one point here, that the avidya has some semblance of the Chaitanya or consciousness, and because of its association with the consciousness, chit tadatmya apanna, so it has got some tadatmya, identity with the Chaitanya because of that particular proximity. Now we understand that when some iron box is placed and the switch is put on, then we know that the energy flows inside and we say that the iron box is hot. It is naturally, it is not the natural property of the iron box, but still we use these words. It is only the electricity that has passed into that, so that is making it hot. Similarly, the ignorance is not actually Chaitanya, it is different, but because of this kind of proximity, because of this kind of nearness, the ignorance is also called chit tadatmya apanna, as if it is identical with this particular consciousness. It is actually the semblance of consciousness. Tat karyamapi sarvam abhasa dvara chid anusyutameva. Therefore, since the ignorance being associated with the semblance of consciousness, the entire world, which is the product of ignorance, is also associated with consciousness. Therefore, we cannot understand the world without consciousness. The consciousness is also with this, because the world is a product of ignorance, ignorance is associated with that, therefore its product world is also associated with consciousness. Tathacha chaitanyasya deepavat swasambadha sarvabhasakatvat. So here, like a lamp illuminates everything, and it illuminates itself also. And consciousness is like a lamp. What does it do? You put a lamp somewhere, you observe that you can see the lamp, and with the help of that light you can see all the other things there. Similarly, the consciousness, it will show everything and it will show itself also. That is actually the idea behind the concept Swaprakasha, Swayam Prakasha. That means it doesn't depend on any other external factors to illuminate itself. Deepavat swasambadha sarvabhasakatvat jagat upadana chaitanyam pramana apeksham antareneva sarvada sarvam bhaset sarvajnam bhavati. So that particular consciousness, it shows itself, it shows all the other things that have come into its contact. Jagad upadana chaitanyam, and it is the consciousness which is the material cause of the world. Pramana apeksha mantarenaiva, and therefore this Chaitanya does not depend on any other pramana for illumination of the things. Sarvada sarvam bhaset, and it can illuminate everything at every time. And therefore, with regard to this particular nature of the consciousness, we call it as Sarvajna, omniscient. Omniscient is that particular property of the consciousness when it can illuminate everything at any point of time. Tena tatrana manameyadi vyavastha kintu jive. Therefore, with regard to this particular consciousness, absolute one, there is no question of vyavastha. There is no question of the system in the form of knower, knowing, and knowledge, knowable, etc. So in other conditions, of course, we have this, that there is a knower, and there is the process of knowing, and there is something object of knowledge, etc. But in this particular absolute reality, there is no such system at all. But where is the system? It is only in the conditioned consciousness. The conditioned consciousness depends on the senses, intellect, etc. And we had seen earlier also that this particular consciousness becomes pramata only through the intellect. That means because of its association with the intellect only, the consciousness is called pramata, and the process is known, the connectivity between the object and knower is the knowledge, and the object being reflected in knowledge is the knowable or vishaya. So all this is possible only at the jiva level, not at the absolute chaitanya level. Thus, whatever had been argued that there will not be manameyadi pratikarma vyavastha in Advaita philosophy has been thoroughly answered here. That means you don't bother about the vyavastha here. All this vyavastha is under the influence of ignorance only, and ignorance being here, we can comfortably explain this phenomenon. Tena tasya buddhyavachinnatvena parichinnatvat. And jiva, how this manameya vyavastha is possible in jiva, not in Ishvara? Because in jiva, buddhi avachinna, because the individual soul is conditioned by the intellect. So this intellect being present there, parichinnatvat, he is also conditioned. Therefore, there can be all these distinctions called the knower, knowledge, known, etc. Tena chit abhivyakti yogyena yena antahkaranena yada yat sambaddham bhavati tadeva tada tadavachinno jivo anubhavati iti na sankarya prasangaha. Now you answer in your Advaita philosophy, if you say that there is only one consciousness, and because of the intellect only the consciousness appears to be pramata in different bodies, so the difference can be justified, etc. Now you say, why there is no admixture of knowledge, why there is no any combination of cognitions, inter-admixture of consciousness? Now there should be sankarya. That means what kind of cognition I get, the same the other person should also get. This is actually the problem in Advaita, because you are talking about one reality. So there should be one kind of cognition everywhere. Now Madhusudana Saraswati is explaining, Tena chit abhivyakti yogyena yena antahkaranena. That means whatever comes in contact with that particular intellect or inner organ, which is activated by this chid bhasa, that means semblance of Chaitanya. So there is consciousness that is activating the intellect, and that particular intellect, if it is associated with whatever object outside, then tadeva tada tadavachinnaha jivaha anubhavati. Then that particular consciousness, being limited or conditioned by that particular intellect, can know that particular object. So this is actually the order of comprehension here. So I know something here, my intellect being conditioned and supported by this consciousness works through the senses, and whatever object, external object comes in contact with my intellect will be reflected in the consciousness, and that consciousness will know that as an object. So thus here, in order that the consciousness can understand the things outside, the intellect is required, the inner sense organ called antahkarana is required. Without this particular brain or mind connecting both the consciousness and the world, knowledge or cognition is impossible. Therefore, knowledge or every experience depends on this particular medium called mind. And that's why in the yoga philosophy also they have been emphatically stating that chittavritti nirodhaha tada drashtu swarupe avasthana. That means once we stop the functioning of the mind, then we will be placed in our own form. We will be established firmly in our own form. So this is the yoga theory. And in Vedanta also, swarupa avasthitireva mokshaha. That means remaining in our pure form as Brahma is the moksha. Thus everywhere it is stated that chitta nasha, or the absence of mind, or totally cessation of thought waves is the thing to be achieved. And if with rigorous practice, if we can achieve this particular control of mind, that is focusing properly, that is one stage, and completely blocking its function is another thing. And it is not forcibly, but by gradual and very clever understanding of the nature of mind, if we can unwrap that particular mind and remove all the impurities from that mind, then the mind will be lost forever, and the loss of that particular mind is really realization. That's why the Vedanta philosophy sees that the external world is only appearance, and the mind is the cause behind this appearance. Therefore, if you stop your mind, the world experience will also stop. And once this is stopped, then the person will remain as energy only. So this is the reason behind. Evamatra prakriya. Now we understand the process here. Sharira madhye sthitaha, being present in the body. Sarva sharira vyapakaha, being all pervading in the body. Sattva pradhanyena sukshma panchabhuta arabdha. Then that particular one, sattva pradhanyena sukshma panchabhuta arabdha, because of the prominence of sattva guna, that which causes the sukshma panchabhuta, that means the subtle elements, 5 elements, antahkaranakhyaha avidya vivartaha, and that is the avidya vivarta known as antahkarana, or the inner sense organ. So this is sense organ, inner sense organ, it is antahkarana, and it is avidya vivarta, that means only an apparent creation of avidya. Darpanadivat ati swachchaha, but itself it is as pure as the mirror. It can reflect anything, but it cannot contain anything. So that kind of energy, netradi dwara nirgatya, that flows out through the senses called eyes, ears, nose and tongue, etc. So through these senses it flows out, and thus ghatadin vishayan prapya, then it reaches the external objects like ghata, etc. and this vyapya, then it envelops that, then tattad akaro bhavati, then this energy takes the form of that particular object. So thus it is within the energy, that energy is sarvavyapi, being present in the entire body, and through the senses it reaches out and it occupies the place of the object, it takes its form. And dhrita tamradivat, how is it happening? Now Madhusudana Saraswati gives the example of dhrita tamra. That means when copper is melted, whenever it is wherever it is placed, it will assume the form of that particular object. Similarly, the energy called antahkarana here that passes through the senses assumes the form of any object outside, and therefore knowledge is nothing but the reflection of external world in our brain. Tasya cha sauralokadivat jhatityeva sankocha vikasau upapadyete. The Advaita philosophy maintains the theory that the antahkarana is like electric energy, and it is very fast energy like the sunlight. It says that it can move very fast, that it can reach any place within a flash of second, and thus it can occupy the place, it can assume the form. So that is possible. Sankocha vikasa, that means this consciousness through the intellect can have both sankocha and vikasa, expansion and contraction. Sacha savayavatvat parinamamanaha, then savayavatvat parinamamanaha. So that energy called antahkarana is also limited. Savayava means with having parts, that is limited, and therefore parinamamanaha, every time that antahkarana will be taking changes. Dehabhyantare ghatadaucha samyak vyapya deha ghatayor madhyepi chakshurvat avichinnopi avatisthate. So dehabhyantare, the same occupies the body, and in the same way occupies the external objects. Thus samyak vyapya, having occupied internally or externally, deha ghatayor madhyepi chakshurvat avichinna api avatisthate. So that energy remains between the object and the body. So it can remain, the Advaita philosophy says that the energy that occupies the object and the body, chakshurvat avichinnopi avatisthate. So like the eye, it is, though it is limited, like the eye, that inner sense organ remains there between the object and the body. Tatra deha antahkarana bhagaha ahankarakhyaha. Then in the body, antahkarana bhagaha, only that part of antahkarana, ahankarakhyaha, which is known as ahankara, is called karta. So when am I called karta? When my antahkarana, inner sense organ, is limited in the body by the ego, that is ahankara. So this aham, when attached to this consciousness, it becomes karta. Deha vishayamapi deha vishayamadhya vritti dandayamanaha tadbhagaha vritti jnanakhyaha kriya ityuchyate. Now what is, once you say that I am karta, then what is the kriya? Kriya is actually that which fills my body. Deha vishayamadhya vritti dandayamanaha tadbhagaha. So that is actually the, like a strong stick, it envelops, it fills my body, and that flow of that particular feeling is called kriya. Vritti jnanakhyaha, and its name is vritti jnana. So you give separate name, but it is after all kriya. Vishaya vyapakaha tadbhagaha vishayasya jnana karmatva sampadakam abhivyakti yogyatvam ityuchyate. Now Vishaya Vyapakaha Tadbhagaha, the portion of consciousness through the intellect occupying the object outside, Vishaya Vyapakaha Tadbhagaha, Vishayasya Jnanakarmatva Sampadakam. So that particular one makes the object known to me. So this is the thing there, Abhivyakti Yogyatvam, and that is basically the eligibility or the worth of that particular object to be known. So when is the object known? Only when it is within the contact of this particular intellect. Tasya Tribhagasya Antahkaranasya, and now in this way the Antahkarana or the sense organ is Tribhaga. It is having three parts, that is Karta, Kriya and Yogyata. Now Antahkaranasya Atisvachatva, the intellect is of course like mirror, it is very pure. Chaitanyam Tatra Abhivyajyate, and because of its purity, this Chaitanya is reflected in the Antahkarana, the Vedanta philosophy says. Tasya cha Abhivyaktasya Chaitanyasya, so thus in the Antahkarana, whatever consciousness is reflected, that Abhivyanjaka Antahkarana Bhaga Bhedat Tridha Vyapadesho Bhavati. So depending on what particular part of the Antahkarana the consciousness is reflected, it has got several names. That means the Chaitanya is one, but it is differently called depending on the mode of reflection of that consciousness in the intellect. So earlier we had seen that the intellect has three parts, that is Karta, Kriya and Yogyata. So depending on that only, when the consciousness gets reflected in that, there will be that particular name. How? One, Kartrubhagavachinna Chidamshaha Pramata. When that consciousness is reflected in that particular Kartrubhaga, then it is called Pramata. So the Chaitanya is called Pramata. Now we have to understand that it has got no original name, but it is only an apparent attributed name, that its reflection in that particular part of the intellect is only called Pramata. Kriya Bhagavachinna Chidamshaha Pramanam. What is Pramana then? That is its reflection in the part of Kriya. In the part of Karta is Pramata, in the part of Kriya is Pramanam. Vishayagataha Abhivyakti Yogyatva Chidamshaha Pramitihi. And then whatever part of the consciousness is reflected in the Vishaya Yogyatva, that part of intellect, it is called Pramiti. Thus Pramata, Pramana, Pramiti, these three can be understood as not in the consciousness, but only in the intellect, depending on the reflection of consciousness in that particular intellect. Prameyantu, but what about the thing outside that is known? Prameyantu Vishayagatam Brahma Chaitanyameva Ajnatam. Actually, the thing known outside is the very consciousness that is called Brahma, but it is unknown. So the unknown Brahma consciousness is the thing outside. And at that particular condition, the Pramata, Pramiti, Pramana will also be possible. Tadevacha Jnatam Sat, when that particular cosmic reality is understood in every object of the universe, then Tat Phalam, then it will not be the Vishaya there, it will be the Phalam or the result of that particular thing there. So in this way, Madhusudana Saraswati has very wisely, very intelligently explained all the intricacies of Advaita, and he tried to reconcile with all the apparent contradictions also on the basis of the traditional Advaita philosophy, that the entire world appearance is only temporary, it is inert, it is not permanent, all these things are there, but only ignorance is coming in between, and because of our ignorance we are experiencing this entire world, and ignorance being removed, there will not be external experience or internal any emotional experience, but only the realization of the reality, and all the problems can be solved in this particular realization. Thus Madhusudana Saraswati has explained the Pratikarma Vyavastha also here, and we will see in the next class the other things like Jiva, Ishvara. how he explains.